Though this may be shocking, I do not encourage people to just pick up random bugs and start eating them. That's gross. I don't do crazy shit like this on my channel too often, but that's gnarly.
Radio Free Intimate episode 185 this week. Fuck it, we'll just do like a bigger band, one that's easier to talk about, one I've been listening to a long fucking time, because back when I was a kid I saw him on one of those top 10 black metal albums of all time lists, and my only reference for what the hell black metal was at the time was like Emperor and Merciful Fate and shit, so I was like, yeah, no, I want to hear some more of that. I didn't hear more of that though, because this week we're going to be covering Beherit from Finland, well known for probably being the most hated black metal band of the 90s, if you were to talk to anybody from back in the day, a band about which there's a whole lot to be said. The core of the band got started in 1989, two men by the names of Automatic Slaughter and Nuclear Holocausto Vengeance. So you know these guys were into that like wacky South American black metal shit, and they kind of started out as an outgrowth of that. If you don't know the Brazilian stuff I'm talking about, I mean specifically bands like early Sepultura, Sarcophago, and of course Holocausto, who the main guy in the band Beherit took his name from. It's like, it sort of happened at the same time as grindcore, and it had a lot of like aesthetic overlap with that in terms of how fast and chaotic it was, but it was a whole lot more metal sounding, and it's definitely still black metal. It influenced a whole lot of black metal that was to come, in addition to a lot of death metal that was to come. As well as war metal, of course. I would definitely consider early Beherit to be emblematic of war metal, that sort of blend of grindcore, black metal, and thrash, sped up and played in a very chaotic fashion. Nowadays, we call it war metal. Back then, it was just black metal. It was like really weird, fast, nasty black metal, like you'd hear from Blasphemy from Canada, or Sarcophago, or Impaled Nazarene, their Finnish cohorts. But I may have pulled a fast one on you just now. You probably thought I was playing Beherit's debut album. And in fact, that's what everybody thought I was just playing until like 2011. Common knowledge was The Oath of Black Blood, which features one of my favorite album covers of all time. It's got fucking skeletons on it, dude.
Boo! Haunted house!
But it turns out that wasn't actually the debut album. They actually did record a proper album, but Oath of Black Blood was just their two demos slapped together. Apparently there was some sort of issue with whatever label they were on at the time, and their actual debut album was thought lost until 2011. Nuclear Holocausto Vengeance found the actual master tapes for what should have been the debut Beherit album, and it's on that album that you can hear them starting to branch out quite a bit more, and you can understand why they are such a unique band. This album was finally released under the title of At the Devil's Studio 1990, and it has a much thicker production, and the riffs are a bit more developed than they were in their demos. And I like it a lot. It's very bassy, dark, and sonorous, nasty sounding cavern core type stuff. It's still war metal, but it's a lot weirder than most war metal. Those vocals are fucking nuts. And then it does stuff like this. Sort of an evolution of the classic Germanic thrash break that I mentioned in the Bound for Glory episode. It's where the songs have a lot more dynamics than most bands of this type. This is the beginning of modern day Beherit. You see, even this riff right here, it's still sort of a counterpoint to that more mid-paced riff. It's like a responding melody. That goes back into that stuff again. I'm glad they played that riff multiple times.
이거는 못 고르지.
Oh, you thought I was going to say that they played it. Well, guess what? You're not the boss of me. I don't have to do what you guys say.
분기반장을 잘할 수 있어.
Plus, they actually played it 3 times, if you listen to the whole song.
God fucking damn, twice?
But the thing about the actual Beherit debut album, as opposed to the compilation of 2 demos that was passed off as a debut album, is that it's sort of a case of shoulda, coulda, woulda. Like, nobody heard that until the early aughts. But it is worth noting that that song in particular showed up on what is unequivocally the second Beherit album, considered by many to either be the best Beherit album or else one of the worst black metal albums of all time. That song was Nocturnal Evil, and for me that's kind of their signature song. And having heard, like the 1990 version of it, I think it might be worth hearing the 1993 version of that song that's on their second album, Drawing Down the Moon, to see where Beherit went and why they are kind of a big deal. The production on this album is absolutely bonkers. It's one of the most alienated sounding pieces of music of all time. So watch where they go with the mid-pace part on this. Very, very different. Integration of keyboards, leaning into the droning aspect quite a bit more. And I think it works wonders because this song rules. And then back into the grindcore parts, which actually emphasized the fact that was a counter melody even more with the new production style. Now this shit gets really spooky. Watch when they start layering keyboards in, man. Right there. Okay, this is like Burzum level, spaced out, fucked up music. And while there are elements of their earlier, almost kind of grindcore sounding stuff on this release, it's mostly those very doomy parts for which this music is remarkable. This album is absolutely dripping with atmosphere, particularly during the slow parts, of which most of the album is made up of that. And those vocals are bonkers. These weird, like, whispered screams run through some kind of wacky processor. A lot of this, like, shamanic style, almost sort of chanting vocals, too. He's got a really strange voice, which adds to the atmosphere, I think. There's a lot of sort of, like, call and response, occult elements to this, so the whole album feels very much like kind of a weird occult ceremony. Also some cool riff variety. Watch this part. It's that same riff, they just changed around the drum beat and how they're playing it. That is called good songwriting, at least when it's done right. And then watch how it goes into some even weirder slow stuff. Fading directly into this, like, almost doom metal riff. Almost sounds like something from a Sabbath album, just a lot weirder. Maybe even a Saint Vitus riff.
Boom! Haunted house!
It'd be really cheesy if it wasn't delivered so convincingly. Also, these keyboards really lend an air of grandeur to it that I quite enjoy. And that's Drawing Down the Moon in a nutshell. Probably the best Beherit album, but they weren't done being weird yet. Or at least Nuclear Holocausto Vengeance wasn't done yet. Everybody else just kind of disappeared. But he decided to keep Beherit going as a solo project, showcasing his newfound interest in electronic music. And he kept the Beherit name going with that in mind. What do you think of that?
I don't like your plan. It sucks.
And I'm guessing most people thought that back in the 90s too. I mean, Beherit's working on 3 levels of hate.
I'm going to be honest with you. I hate this
Finnish black metal band.
Their demos, they were playing this really nasty bestial style of black metal that was fairly ear-grating to the more pampered ears of many metalhead out there. And then their second album probably turned off, the nascent war metal crowd because it was all weird and atmospheric. And now he's probably pissing off people that even stuck through the journey to that second album by doing some weird electronic stuff. But luckily, he decided to appeal to my particular autism by doing that thing again where he re-records something from the prior era of Beherit in whatever the new Beherit style is. So that Gate of Nana song you just listened to, what does that sound like in the new Beherit style? Oh, that's
저는 여기서
it's interesting.
아, 회의해야 되는데 챙댕이 또 어디 갔어?
Okay, fine, maybe that song wasn't great. This is the third Beherit album. It's entitled what appears to be a random sequence of letters and numbers, H418OV21.C.
What?
I'm a computer.
Yeah, I don't fucking know. But actually, apart from that misstep, opening the album with that, which admittedly wasn't great, you know, it was kind of dark and spooky, but it was also kind of like, oh, no! This is actually a pretty cool album. In fact, in many ways, this actually adequately replicates the ambience of the second Beherit album in a new, more electronic-focused style. It's almost sort of like an evil counterpart to Brian Eno's Another Green World album, and then it's a lot of little kind of like mini ambient tracks that do some like really weird soundscapes that transition into each other. This was probably my introduction to like this kind of weirder ambient music. A lot of it would also be comparable to the second Aphex Twin album, Selected Ambient Works Volume 2. With just lots of odd soundscapes that are busy enough to still be interesting. And they're based on a lot of like weird analog, fucked up like sine wave things that I find interesting at least. And like I said, this is very similar in atmosphere and tone to the second Beherit album. At least in the heavier moments of the ambience. The lighter parts, I gotta say, this must have influenced Paysage Diver's synth experimentation almost as much as Burzum did. This part also reminds me a lot of Aphex Twin, and I'm a big fan of that stuff. So overall, despite, you know, like kind of a rocky start to this era, I think it holds up fairly well. But when it comes to this new synthesized era of Beherit,
the benefits don't stop there.
Because the follow-up album to incomprehensible number-letter gibberish entitled Electric Doom Synthesis, which was actually the first Beherit album I ever heard, really perfects that sort of like weird electronic soundscapey style while subtly blending in a lot of black metal elements. It brings back more conventional percussion, and it actually utilizes a lot of synthesizers that sound pretty similar to something you would do on a guitar. I feel like this is what Nuclear Holocausto Vengeance was trying to do on that first track on the prior album. He's making black metal with non-black metal instrumentation. And it works pretty well. This is some unsettling stuff. More of that weird grinding analog synthesizer. That's good stuff right there. And even more so than the prior album, this one absolutely captures that same atmosphere that was such a vital component of Beherit's earlier work. Just in like a new form. Actually, if you were to ask me what my favorite Beherit album was, I would say either this one or Drawing Down the Moon, the second album. They're both solid, and despite being very different in aesthetic, they have very similar atmosphere and songwriting. Very spooky stuff. I think hearing this album was actually a pretty big influence on me in my formative years, because I was probably like maybe 14 or 15 or some shit, and I heard this album on something that said Top 10 Black Metal Albums of All Time. And you know, little Babby Jub was just like, that's black metal? Oh, okay, I guess. I don't know. It was a very eye-opening experience for me. And I think it prepared me for the fact that even earlier Beherit, when it wasn't all electronic, was going to be pretty weird. And overall, it prepared me in like life as a listener and creator of music to be okay with a lot weirder stuff. After this fourth Beherit album, Nuclear Holocausto Vengeance, kind of put the project on ice for a while. He started up a new thing called Suri Shamani that was like much more into drone that I wasn't particularly fond of. Worked as a DJ for a while. And then out of nowhere in 2009, Beherit comes out with a new album, a fucking black metal album. He's got like a full band back now.
Wow.
Is it gonna be any good?
Let's find out.
Spoiler alert, Engram is an awesome fucking album. It's an amazing follow-up to Drawing Down the Moon, while also kind of maintaining a lot of the weird experimentation from Electric Doom Synthesis. You have a lot of these like really sonorous like chugging riffs, very ambient and cyclical, over which he lays like all this like cool keyboard stuff. The production is fantastic. It's like thick and fuzzy. I could see, like, if you're into newer stuff like Earthfaust, you'll fucking dig this album. Very weird, very esoteric black metal. Heavy on atmosphere as always, and actually probably a little bit more accessible than anything Beherit's ever done without selling out. The other interesting part about this album is that it not only brings back the Drawing Down the Moon style, it gets back into some of their demo era material with like these super fast, like brutal parts that kind of crash in between like the more mid-paced bits. It's all really good stuff. Highly recommend this album. It's like a summation of everything that had happened in Beherit's career up to that point, but then they also push things in a new direction. It's actually very catchy at times, which is never a word I would use to describe older Beherit, but somehow it fits in perfectly with their old style. It actually reminds me a lot of Burzum's comeback album around the same time, where they sort of came back, and I won't say it's like they never left, because they were definitely gone for a long time, but they came back, and not only were they recapturing the spirit of the old stuff, they were actually doing new stuff that was also just as interesting. You know, it's good to see an actual good reunion album. Imagine that shit. Very cool stuff. A few years later, they put out this sort of mini album that was just 2 super duper long songs. So definitely still experimenting and going in new directions, because that was never part of Beherit before. But yeah, these 2 like crazy long songs. And I gotta say, the second side of this little EP thing here, Celebrate the Dead, might be my favorite Beherit song. It's very long and very droning, but in a very pleasant way. Well, maybe not pleasant, but in an intriguing way. It's very nasty sounding and incredibly atmospheric. And it uses these weird like trip-hop drum beats that you wouldn't think would work with this sort of like droning black metal, but it absolutely fucking does. And there's so much cool layering going on. Nice little transitions too. Like the keyboards on this are outstanding. As far as like black metal putting you into a trance, this is kind of the peak of that. Really cool stuff. And each time this part happens, you know some weird shit's about to go down. Drop that distortion off entirely, just into clean guitar. I really had to truncate this to show it on the show here. It's a long fucking song. What is this? This sounds like fucking Dungeon Synth, dude. Weird, spooky, evil church music, man. And I love it. It's like a really deranged fugue. Maybe if Bach's Ghost came back, he'd write stuff like this. And these really plaintive, clean vocals. They're a bit unsteady, but I think that actually adds to the effect of the song overall. Cannot recommend Celebrate the Dead enough. And it's cool to see him going back into experimental territory and still having it be, you know, fucking good. He actually put out a new album last year, too. This guy takes a while to put out albums. That was pretty cool, too. It went much farther into ambient territory, and it was very spooky. It wasn't as electronically focused as Electric Doom Synthesis. It had a lot of found sound shit in it, but I don't know if I've listened to it enough to, like, analyze it properly. So I'll say, you know, go out and give it a listen for yourself, but definitely check out all the Beherit stuff I played on here if you liked any of it, because it's a love-hate kind of band, you know? People with good taste will love it, and dummies will hate it. I'm just kidding. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.
There's a niche for what I do on YouTube, yes. I see kids eating Tide Pods on YouTube, and I'm just like, stop.